Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a fun thought experiment that combines pop culture, character analysis, and a little bit of retail therapy. The question of the day is, if Brian Griffin from Family Guy opened his own retail store, what on earth would he sell? We all know Brian the family dog who's more human than canine, a struggling writer, a martini enthusiast, and let's be honest, a little bit pretentious. So, let us put on our thinking caps and imagine what Brian's Emporium would look like. First off, the vibe. It wouldn't be a big box store, that's for sure. I'm picturing something decidedly independent, maybe a little too cool for its own good. Think of a hipster coffee shop that's also a bookstore, or a bookstore that's also a bar. You know, the type-exposed brick, dim lighting, jazz music playing softly in the background, and an air of intellectual superiority. He would want a place where he could hold court, look smart, and maybe, just maybe, finally get a date. The sign outside would probably be something understated and literary, like the Gilded Page and the Olive, or something equally dramatic. Now, let's talk about the main event, the products. The biggest section, without a doubt, would be dedicated to his primary passion, or at least his primary aspiration, being a writer. The bookshelves would be groaning under the weight of classic literature. You'd find your Hemingways, your Fitzgeralds, your Dostoevskys all, the authors Brian name drops to sound intelligent. But front and center, displayed more prominently than any Nobel Prize winner, would be his own literary masterpieces. Imagine a pyramid of books with a spotlight shining down on them. At the top, you'd have his magnum opus, the self-help book that actually got published. Wish It, Want It, Do It would probably tell every single customer that it changed lives, even though he can't stand it himself. Right below that, you'd find copies of his failed novel, Faster Than the Speed of Love. Maybe he'd market it as a cult classic or a misunderstood gem. And of course, there would be his definitive guide to modern masculinity. Brian Griffin's Guide to Booze, Broads, and Lost. Art of Being a Man. He would probably offer to sign copies, whether you asked him to or not. To complement the books, there would be a whole section for aspiring writers. We're talking expensive, leather-bound journals that are too nice to actually write in. Fountain pens that cost a fortune and probably leak ink everywhere. And specialty paper may be described as artisanal, hand-pressed, organic parchment for the discerning wordsmith. It's all about selling the idea of being a writer, which is something Brian knows a lot about. He'd be selling the dream he's still chasing. But let's be real, writing is thirsty work. And no one knows that better than Brian. So, the second major section of his store would essentially be a high-end liquor cabinet. This is where his true expertise shines. The centerpiece would be the ultimate dry martini kit. It would come with a bottle of premium, top-shelf gin, of that cheap stuffer Tiny, elegant bottle of dry vermouth, a jar of fancy, hand-stuffed olives, and a sleek stainless steel martini shaker. He'd probably give you a very detailed, unsolicited tutorial on the perfect shaking technique and the ideal vermouth-to-gin ratio. Beyond martinis, the shelves would be stocked with a curated selection of classic spirit. Aged Scotch, small-batch bourbon, vintaged wines. Anything that sounds sophisticated when you order it. If his store leaned more towards the coffee shop side, you can bet the coffee menu would be ridiculously complicated. We're talking single roger, crews with names you can't pronounce, drinks like deconstructed mochaccino with a hint of cardamom and existential dread. The goal isn't just to sell you a drink, it's to make you feel like you're part of an exclusive intellectual club. And that brings us to the third, and perhaps most Brian-esque category of merchandise, the self-serving, philosophical junk. This is where his fraudulent intellectualism really comes out to play. Think about a rack of T-shirts with quotes from famous authors and philosophers. But in true Brian fashion, many of them would be slightly misquoted or completely misattributed. A shirt that says, "to be or not to be," that is the question. Plato. He'd probably argue with you if you tried to correct him. There would also be a section for media, but only the right kind of media. We're talking obscure black and white art house films on DVD or even Laserdisc for extra pretentiousness. The music section would be old vinyl, featuring classic jazz artists and indie bands no one has ever heard of. He would judge your purchases, of course. If you pick up a popular record, he might sigh and say, their early work was so much more authentic. Finally, and this is the hilarious part, we have to acknowledge that despite his human aspirations, Brian is still a dog. So, tucked away in a corner, almost as an afterthought, there would be a small, begrudging section for dog supplies. But this wouldn't be your average pet store stuff. Oh no. It would be luxury goods for the sophisticated canine. We're talking designer leather leashes, cashmere dog sweaters, and gourmet. Organic dog food with ingredients like wild-caught salmon and quinoa. It's the kind of stuff he'd want for himself. But hilariously, right next to all that fancy gear, you'd probably find a box of his own personal stash of regular old dog biscuits and a roll of poop bags, which he'd quickly hide if a customer came near. So there you have it. Brian Griffin's store. A masterful, chaotic blend of highbrow literature, top-shelf liquor, and self-aggrandizing merchandise, all run by a dog who desperately wants you to think he's a man of culture. It would be a place where you could buy a classic novel, a perfect martini, and a T-shirt with a fake quote, all at the same time. Honestly, I think I'd go just for the experience. What do you guys think? What else would Brian sell in his store? Let me know your ideas down in the comments below. Thanks so much for hanging out and brainstorming with me today. If you enjoyed this little thought experiment, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.